The United States has had a growing homeless problem. On any given night, there are approximately 550,000 Americans that experience homelessness. Now, there are many different reasons why these individuals might have become homeless. Their home could have been in a bad state of repair, which was damaging their health. A relationship breakdown in their home forced them to leave. The individual's home was not safe due to domestic violence reasons, or the individual had fallen ill or got injured, which caused them to lose their job and they were unable to afford a place to live. Now, although the homeless population is a problem, it helps motivate private organizations and the government to try and come up with a solution for this problem. Now, for example, in Austin, Texas, a billionaire by the name of John Paul DeJaria created a community of tiny homes called Mobile Loaves and Fishes. Now, this community consists of about 250 homes, and it costs about $90 a month for the individuals that live there. And the requirements to move into these tiny homes, you must have been sleeping on or homeless on the street for about a year, and alcohol and fighting is prohibited. Now, this tiny community also offers many different programs such as wood shop, auto shop, metal shop, different crafts, and gardening. And this helps uh, teach these individuals different skills so they can get a job and build themselves back up and get back into society. Um, Now, these tiny communities aren't the only thing that are being built. Uh, Homeless shelters are also built across the United States. Many food pantries are in many different cities, but these are only really a temporary fix. These homeless shelters and food pantries, and it does provide them a safe place to live. It provides them with food, so they're not starving while they're living on the streets. But many of these homeless shelters don't implement programs to help slowly reintroduce them into society. Now, if programs were created, it would help motivate the homeless to help build themselves back up, get back into society. And if the shelter is handing out supplies, food, shelter without any requirements, this could cause the individuals to learn something called learned helplessness. Now, learned helplessness is a behavior that is exhibited by an individual when they endure a repeated stimuli beyond their control. So, this causes the individual to accept that they have no power to change anything, and it causes them to discontinue their attempts to escape or find help. So, the status of homelessness is the individual's unpleasant stimuli, and the homeless shelters and food pantries are reinforcing that learned helplessness by not um, giving the homeless the power to get back into society and better their lives. Now, if more programs are created, such as Mobile Loaves and Fishes in Austin, Texas, it would allow for the homeless to help themselves. Now, communities of small homes, homeless shelters, or programs created to help reintroduce the homeless into society aren't always that effective. For example, in Los Angeles, California, there's a area called Skid Row. Now, Skid Row is a 50-block area of downtown LA, and it consists of a very big encampment of homeless people. It's rat infested. It's ravaged with addiction. Many individuals living there suffer from some form of mental illness, and it was created about 25 to 30 years ago. The city officials in Los Angeles, they believed that putting all of the homeless services into one area in downtown LA would help solve their growing homeless problem. But with the high cost of living and high rent prices, these homeless services soon became overwhelmed, and all the homeless just moved onto the streets in that 50-block area and created Skid Row. Now, in a report conducted in October of 2019, it showed that the number of homeless deaths between 2008 and 2013 had doubled. And this raised the overall death rate by about a third. And according to the Los Angeles County Department of Public Health, drug and alcohol overdoses is the leading cause of death in Skid Row, sitting at about 27%. And this is closely followed by violence, which sits at about 24%. And because of this high fatality rate within Skid Row, the Los Angeles Fire Department, Station 9, it's one of the busiest in the United States. Now, the Station 9, it serves the smallest area in the city, but because of Skid Row so close by, they have the highest call load. They respond to about 80 to 100 calls a day, and with staffing thin beyond um, all different agencies across the United States, it puts some stress and strain on that department. And with the growing problem in downtown LA, it's created many different challenges for first responders. So, according to Station 9, about 43% of the calls or incidents that result in a fire, it's about 43% of them have been involved with a homeless person. So this adds up to about 3,267 incidences last year alone. Now, due to the fact that the living conditions are poor in Skid Row, there's rats, illnesses, it causes the risk for a first responder to contract the disease to increase. Now, in the when a first responder responds to that area, the risk of contracting hepatitis, HIV, tuberculosis, meningitis, MRSA, typhus has just continued to increase with how unsanitary the living conditions are. So there's high addiction rates within Skid Row as well. It costs about $2 if you would like a hit of crystal meth while wandering through Skid Row. Now, a individual named Melvin was a homeless individual who used to live on Skid Row, and he stated that you have to sleep with one eye open always because of violence, robbery, and killings. Now, Skid Row shows that implementing all of the homeless outreach services into one area isn't that effective, especially in an area where the cost of living is insanely high. Nobody can afford to live there, they lose their job, and they move onto the street, which causes all of the homeless services to be overwhelmed. Now, in Milwaukee, Wisconsin, city officials have had a little better success solving their homeless problem. For some time, there was an encampment called Tent City. It was congregated underneath the I-794 overpass, and it started to gain big media attention. Now, the land that the encampment was built on was owned by the Department of Transportation, so they put up signs saying that they'll be issued a municipal citation, and police set up eviction notices, but it was all ignored. The homeless population in Tent City ignored it. It continued to grow. Private agencies and help groups provided them new tents, building materials to try and make the living conditions in Tent City a little better than what they were. But pressure from city officials continue to rise to try and get that Tent City to be moved and get those individuals into some more permanent housing. So that's why a city official by the name of Eric Collins Dyke, he's an outreach services manager at the Milwaukee County Department of Health and Human Services Housing Division. So he created a plan called My House and Housing First. So this plan was created to help move the homeless living into Tent City into more permanent housing. So it'll start off with a staff member working with an individual from when they enter the program until they find a permanent place to stay. So Milwaukee's city officials implemented this plan to find more permanent housing for the population before the encampment grew, because the main concern about this encampment was the health conditions within it. They didn't want people to get sick, which would cause other people living in the city to get sick. and they were also worried that crime rates would increase as well. Now, the plan implemented by the city officials in Milwaukee was a lot more effective than the plan implemented in Los Angeles. Placing all the homeless in one area uh, causes the homeless population to congregate into one area and overwhelm those outreach programs, whereas Milwaukee's plan took each individual one by one, put them into housings across the state, and stayed with them and helped motivate them, showing them that they can help themselves. Now, not every person that is experiencing homelessness wants help. Uh, Many choose homelessness because they like that way of life. They like the feeling of being free. So they just don't look for help. They continue doing what they're doing. Now, different plans have been and programs have been implemented and are effective in helping to reintroduce the homeless, whether it's the tiny houses, different work programs, or different trade programs and educational resources for the homeless. Um, but with the increase of crime rate in downtown LA and the growing encampment of Skid Row, LA has kind of turned into a lawless community, and this is one of the examples of where a plan had failed. So each cities will have to create their own unique plan that'll cater to their specific problems and needs. But the government and organizations can only urge the homeless to accept help. They can't be forced to do it if they don't want it.